Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular City Council meeting for January 7th, 2020. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, Sylvia.
Mayor Mays.
Here.
Council President Rosner.
Here.
Councilor Browse. Here. Councilor Garland.
Here.
Councilor Young. Here. Councilor Griffin.
Here.
Councilor Scott.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. We have approval of agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda. We have 6 items on the consent agenda this evening. Item A is approval of the December 3rd, 2019 City Council meeting minutes. Item B is approval of the December 12th, 2019 City Council meeting minutes. Item C is Resolution 2020-001, appointing the budget officer for fiscal year 2020-2021. Item D is Resolution 2020-002, authorizing the city manager to purchase a street sweeper. Item E is Resolution 2020-003, appointing Brian Amir to the Comprehensive Plan Community Advisory Committee. Resolution 2020-004 is appointing Jeff Roberts to the Comprehensive Plan Community Advisory Committee.
Move consent.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. All in favor of approving the consent as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Citizen comments. Time to address Council on any issue not on public hearing this evening. Anyone? All right, we will move on to new business. It is a new year, first meeting of the new year. It is time to select council president for the city council. Tim, thank you for your service this past year. I certainly appreciate the additional workload that you took on and helping cover for me and other responsibilities you did. And thank you very much. So what about this year? Council?
Can I nominate somebody?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Can I speak?
Yeah, right ahead.
No.
I haven't talked to Tim about this, but I would like to nominate Tim once again.
Thank you.
Tim, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Any other nominations? Is there a motion?
I would also like to make a nomination. I know Renee is interested as well in serving, and I think Tim has done a fantastic job and would do a fantastic job again, but I think in the interest of having a conversation about other options, I'd love to bring Renee's name forth if she's interested.
Renee, are you interested?
Yes.
Very good. Any other nominations? So remind me what happens when we have 2 people interested.
Josh, I'm looking at you. It's been a couple years since that's happened.
That's happened for a long time. I think what we've done is Sylvia, do you recall what we did last time?
We can do it multiple ways, but I'm deferring to you so I can defer to you.
I think we just
done
said
votes?
all in favor of one, say aye. All in favor of the
Yeah.
other, say aye.
Do a specific motion on one.
Arm wrestling?
I mean, if I could ask both to state why they'd like to be council president. But I think we know both very well, and we could just do a show of hands for each, or we could do a motion for one and see if the motion passes.
I think the second is what we've done before. We've done
Correct.
a vote on each until one gets a majority. So we did a motion on one and see if it passes, and then if it doesn't, we try a motion on the other one, see if that passes.
What would council like to do? It's the council's show on this one.
Correct.
I'll make a motion for Tim Rosner for city council president.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor of Tim being council president for this year, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. Tim, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know Renee would also do an awesome job. Next on the agenda is public hearings. Sylvia?
The Sherwood City Council will hold two public hearings this evening to hear testimony on ordinance 2020-001, amending sections of the Sherwood Zoning and Community Development Code as it relates to the regulation of fences, and ordinance 2020-002, amending Title V of the Sherwood Municipal Code regarding business licenses and regulations. The public hearings this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present a staff report. Questions, if any, by the City Council for staff. We will receive written testimony. We will then open the public hearing for testimony, and the time will be limited to 4 minutes per person. Any interested person may present testimony. We will then close the public hearing. No other comments will be heard. Final comments by staff, questions of staff, if any, by the council, followed by discussion by the council. This is the first hearing on both these items. Generally, the council will hold 2 hearings prior to making a decision. A second hearing on these ordinances is currently scheduled for January 21st. However, in accordance with the Sherwood City Charter, council reserves the right to make a decision at the close of this hearing by a unanimous vote of all sitting council members. If you wish to speak, please fill out a testimony form and submit it to the city recorder. The mayor will recognize people wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed to the mayor. When you come forward, please state your name and address for the record, as this hearing will be recorded.
Thank you, Sylvia. So we'll start with ordinance 2020-001, amending sections of the Sherwood Zoning and Community Development Code as it relates to regulating fences.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Sylvia, could we get the screen to pull down? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
All I'm saying is, Joe, you've been in the job longer than he's been elected. He found the button right away behind the flag.
Actually, I think he may have done it before he got
No, I pressed it. Brad showed me how to do it.
Thank you, Councilman.
We can't expect Joe to know everything.
That's true.
Great.
Love to have that.
So the ordinance that you have before you tonight are some proposed amendments to the Sherwood Fence Code. And before I start with my short presentation, I do want to recognize that written testimony did come in from the Conrath family, and I think all of you did receive it, so I just want to say that has been entered into the record. So why an update to our fence code? The last fence code update took place in 2001, and earlier this year, we did receive a couple of complaints about fences on corner lots, and we took those issues to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission reviewed the code, and before you tonight, they have proposed some amendments to make our code a little bit more clear for consistency for readers here in Sherwood. And so during that time, we took a pause on fence enforcement while the proposed amendments went through the hearing process and review process through Planning Commission. So just for a quick comparison of our current code and the proposed code changes, we looked at fences in the front yard setbacks. There's no change to that language being proposed. On corner, side yard, street side lots, we did change the code, or what is being proposed does change it. It changes it to be a little bit more lenient than what the current code is. So the current code states that a fence can't be placed closer than 8 feet from the sidewalk, and this is due to the public utility easements that runs down the street side corner side lot of parcels here in Sherwood. And the proposed code language allows either a 42-inch fence along the property line on corner street side lots, or a fence up to 6 feet may be placed 5 feet back from the property line. So this is a little bit more lenient and provides 2 options for property owners. There's been no changes proposed for rear yard and side yard fence standards, and there are no changes with the fences adjacent to public access ways or alleys. We did make a couple additional changes. We added a general condition about receiving approval from the city engineer if constructing retaining walls in the PUE. And then we added a general condition for people to locate public utilities of placing a fence within the public utility easement area. And then overall, we created a matrix. So these code standards are now in a table format, which eases readability for readers of the code. And I just want to talk about code enforcement just a little bit and what this means. So if a fence was legally constructed in accordance with the criteria at the time it was built, even if it does not comply with the current standards, it is grandfathered. It's what we considered grandfathered in and does not need to be brought into compliance. If a fence was built and it did not meet the code standards at the time it was built, but the code actually changes to allow that fence, then that code is in compliance now. So if a fence was constructed and did not meet the code criteria at the time it was constructed and still does not meet the code language in the code, it is not grandfathered because it is illegal non-conforming. Also with code compliance issues, our code compliant program is complaint driven. So when we do receive code compliance issues on fences, each fence will be looked at individually. So in the staff report, these code changes meet the criteria for code changes. As far as public outreach, we did have information on the city's website. We put up an FAQ. We also did an article in the Sherwood Archer in the October-November issue. We also posted information that referred back to the city's website about the frequently asked questions list on social media. And then we also provided notice of the public hearing throughout within our 5 locations in town, and then we posted notice in the Times. What we are proposing after the adoption of these proposed changes is that we would provide a fence handout, a diagram of how fences can be installed on properties and what that would look like, similar to what we already do now with our accessory dwelling. We have an accessory structure little handout that states this is where a shed or an accessory dwelling can be placed on a property, and it's really useful to provide people as they come to the counter asking questions. And then we'll also do a letter to local fence companies notifying them of any code changes that are made. So with that, staff respectfully recommends City Council conduct the first reading of Ordinance 2020-001, amending sections of the Sherwood Zoning and Community Code as it relates to fences. With that, I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Erica. I got a quick question. Side yard, front yard, talks about a short fence on the property line. We have sidewalks typically on front yard, side yards. So where's the property line? The property line is on the other side of the sidewalk, but by the street. It's not, or do you define it in the language to say it's in your proposed code language, 5 feet from the property line, you mean by the sidewalk?
Sidewalk, correct.
So it's clear in the code language that says sidewalk?
So the code language, I believe, says 5 feet back from the property line.
So the property line is not the back of the sidewalk. The plot of a lot goes to the curb.
No, usually the sidewalk is in the public right of way.
Right away.
So
It's usually the right of way line, or the property
there's
line.
utility easements, and then there's the road right of way.
The property line is usually about a foot away from the sidewalk. So, on the house side. In newer subdivisions, that's generally the case.
Okay.
And It is the property owner's responsibility to ensure that they are putting a fence on a property line and not in the right-of-way. And if we became aware of an issue where they've placed a fence in the right-of-way, then we'd have to deal with
I also was under the impression that, yes, the property owner is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk and all that because it's on their property.
It is not on their property.
And we have
no.
an easement to put it there.
No. Most of the time, no.
So generally, you have the right-of-way, which contains the road, the curb, and the sidewalk. And then after that, you've got the public utility easement. The sidewalk is typically in the right-of-way. The responsibility for maintenance is based on being the adjoining property owner, but not because it's actually on their property.
Okay, and so, so by your comment, there are some cases where that is not the case in this town?
Properties?
Yeah, I'm not saying definitively it is always in the right-of-way because there are older properties and there might be situations where that's not the case, but certainly in any new subdivision or any subdivision built within the last 20, 30 years, yes.
So in the event, do we need to have clarification in the language to cover the older, potential old ones? Just, I'm playing devil's advocate.
I'm pretty confident that property line is sufficient.
We can take a look at that. I think the old language of sidewalk is more problematic because there are certainly areas where there are no sidewalks.
Right.
But we can certainly look at whether there's a need to say either or.
Right, so if they could just be, that would be greatly appreciated. We don't want any confusion as to exactly where that line is, that where you either pace off 8 feet or 5 feet or 6 feet or no feet, whatever. Yep. The line is the line, and cover it for a real old lot or a brand new lot. That was my only question.
And if those old lots is 5 feet.
So, any other questions for Erica? Great, we'll open up for public hearing. Carissa, you signed up? Thanks, Erica. Welcome, Chris.
Okay, so Carissa Conrath, 20333 Southwest Lavender. So I've given you guys my testimony. I spoke at least a couple times for City Council, and then I spoke Planning Commission. I think everybody here has been, except for Ty. Hello. Everybody here has been here. I've already spoken. I don't really have anything new other than what I wrote in my testimony. It's clearly too long to read in 4 minutes. I hope that everyone has truly had the time to look at it and read it and understanding. I don't specifically oppose the code. It's hard for me. I don't oppose it. I just think that fences should be grandfathered that are already standing. Especially in our situation, it's a unique lot. It's not a corner, it's unique. So I've proposed to have a permit. I know the Planning Commission doesn't want to have a permit. It was spoken about. I don't know here which commission it was spoken about, but there's so many rules, and even, I appreciate, Mayor Hayes, you asking questions about it, because yes, the code is incredibly confusing for any layperson to understand it. It just doesn't work. And I've also mentioned the inconsistencies with the webpage, which in theory was made for us as citizens to be able to look at and make choices for that, with it being inconsistent with the code, and then having all these other things in the actual code itself unrelated to what's on the webpage. There's just too much. Where's your property line? If I'm me, when you said where's your property line, my thought is it's right at the sidewalk. But then I've heard from other people, no, it's not. It's actually 5 feet from the outside of the sidewalk, not 5 feet from the inside. So to end all of this confusion, and I realize I'm the only person here to fight about it, but this started out as me fighting for my fence, but now after seeing all the paperwork, coming to all these meetings, doing all this research, it's kind of evolved into, I still have to fight my HOA for this, so it's like, I might be out of luck anyway. But it's all these other people that actually live on corner lots now that it's not fair to them that if their house is built and they built a fence after and they didn't know about the fence codes because they read it, they thought they followed it, but now all of a sudden they're going to have to change their fence. 7 years later, I gave some examples in my testimony about how it's it seems unethical at this point to make people change the fence when the city itself wasn't enforcing codes. I know it's code-driven, but it sounds like the previous code compliance officer had complaints, but didn't enforce them because it was a civil matter. So now, X number of years later, to backtrack and say, okay, well, now we're going to enforce this code. I'm not someone that's going to go through and turn in 35 people. I went through and I found 35 lots. I didn't turn those in because I don't want to do that to people. But knowing how many people are going to be affected, it's not right and seems incredibly unethical to make people change fences that have no malintent. Nobody is going to wager $4,000, potentially $10,000 on, gee, I hope my fence is compliant. Like, they're going to put the effort into it, they're going to look into it, and they're going to get it done. So really, I'm just wondering at this point, because I don't feel like any of my testimony's been, I don't feel like anyone's mind really has been changed about anything anytime I've talked or written anything, so I'm just wondering if there's really anything that would change minds to grandfather the current fences. Like, what could be presented other than everything that I've been presenting? Does anybody have any input about that or any questions about anything in my testimony? Or
No, we certainly appreciate your testimony and what you've done with and presented to the Planning Commission and the City Council, but we'll ultimately decide if, I generally believe that my expectation is the council is not going to adjudicate individual cases. We hire professional staff, put it on their, it's their responsibility to get all the facts, to understand the facts, and reach decisions that is best for that situation, because they'll all be unique. So that's my expectation. And you have, as you indicated in your, I don't know all the facts of your situation, but you have the city code, and then you also have your even stricter, probably, HOA in your situation. So.
And I think the concerns I have, though, is really this entire, over a year now that I've been working with this, there hasn't been dialogue. It's really just been me fighting my case as a monologue the entire time.
Well, there's a I don't know all the facts, but if it's minor, if you bought a house that had an existing fence, you tore down the fence and you built a bigger fence, without understanding if that was legal or not. I mean, why would a previous owner put a small fence in if most people would put a tall fence in if they could? They probably did their research to understand a small fence was what was allowed and not a bigger fence. So you've got a rough case.
Right.
I mean, really rough case. And I might have some of the facts wrong, and there could be other circumstances. But that's what you get to, depending upon the action of council. If we modify the code or don't modify the code, for you to have a conversation with your HOA as well as code enforcement with the city.
So at this point, you guys wouldn't talk about grandfathering. It would be code compliance that would have to.
We'll see what the conversation goes. My position is detailed quite eloquently in the slide by Erica, and that's my position personally.
Okay, and everyone had a chance to, because I mean, the questions that you just raised and the understanding, I wrote it in here, the situation that I did buy it, but the code changed, and then I researched it, and it followed that. So I did do what I was supposed to. What I didn't do, though, and I'll tell you, is I didn't read to understand every bit of the code itself, because I'm not Josh. I don't have a lot of, I don't understand it. You can probably ask anybody on the street. They don't understand things written like that, which is why there's a fence page, I presume, and we don't require a permit. So what is the fence page for? I went on it and I read it, and it seems pretty straightforward to me when I read it. So I wasn't confused about it, and it didn't say contact the city. It didn't say do anything. It just said fences, follow these to ensure your fence is compliant. So that's what I did.
Yep.
So now I'm being punished, and I'm going to have to financially lose that money because the fence page doesn't match the code. And I understand, yes, you should understand the code, but lay people don't do that. We don't understand that.
And I appreciate your time. Your time is up.
Yeah.
But I don't agree with all your points, but that doesn't matter, because again, I'm not personally interested in being the judge and jury. I'm not interested in grandfathering, as you're suggesting. I'm supporting of the staff's process for fence codes. And like I say, you've got the bigger, from my experience with HOAs, issue of working with your HOA as well, even if we were to do something different. But
I really shouldn't even have said HOA. Like, I haven't even talked to them about this at this point. I'm not interested in what they have to say. What I'm worried about more is not only mine, but everybody else in the city. Like, it's not.
I appreciate that.
So wrong.
But thanks for your testimony. Eugene Stewart.
Yes, Eugene Stewart, own property across the street. I know downtown area, you're allowed to build up to the property line. So would you be allowed to put a fence up to the property line since you're allowed to put a building up to the property line?
So I'll refer you to the code
No.
and the staff.
And the other thing is does this also include because I've noticed a lot of places where the subdivision signs seem to be impinging upon the clear vision sight on the corners. Would those be made to come back into compliance, or is that not part of the fence code?
Signs are part of the sign code, not the fence code. And if something is in violation of the clear vision standards, then that should definitely be brought to compliance attention.
Yep. Yeah,
A lot of times also I notice where you put the stop line, it puts you back where you're creeping out halfway, your vehicle's halfway over the stop line to get clear vision to proceed. So it seems like that needs to be addressed at some points too. I don't know exactly what dictates where you put it, the stop line, but still for the clear vision, that's my major concern with fences, and then some of the signs that have gone up that are actually part of fences. They're walls sometimes too.
It is certainly important that we have a safe community and navigating by vehicle, bike, or pedestrian. And that's part of why we have the subcommittee of the Police Advisory Committee to also look at such issues. Thank you. Anyone else like to testify on proposed ordinance? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing for the first reading of the proposed ordinance. Discussion or questions of council?
No, I would just say I just want to address the concerns. We did get the packet in time, and I know I read the packet. I thought it was some very good points that you made in there, and I appreciate the way that you wrote that and some of the proposed things. It wasn't just here's a problem, but here's some proposed solutions, so I do appreciate that. We did also receive quite a few communications from our city staff as well, addressing a lot of the questions that we as council had before this meeting. A lot of the questions that I was thinking of, apparently my fellow councilors also had, and I think Julia did a great job laying those out and addressing those. So I appreciate the work that the staff did in making this as simple as possible for someone like myself to understand as well. I'm not a planning commissioner, I'm not a lawyer, but I think I've got a pretty good grasp on the code today based on what I've read. So thanks.
I'd just like to echo what Sean said. We did get it, did read every single letter. A lot of good points were made. And we had a lot of conversations with staff on this. And the issue of grandfathering is a tough one because every situation is a little bit unique as I really started to think about this and talk with staff about it. Because you could have a situation where it's a safety issue with sight lines. You could have an issue where because of the way the utilities are run through that area that it creates a hazard. So we have to be careful about that. I'm Councilor Scott. It was like you had an idea, and I wanted to throw it out there. And I don't see a really solid mechanism for how we could grandfather, even if we wanted to. Even from a precedent, there's also a precedent issue with that if we have future issues come up. But is there a way? And Josh, we talked about this, that we could have. Besides safety and hazards and sight lines, The other reason we have the fence code is for aesthetics, so we don't have a bunch of neighborhoods with 6-foot fences running, across all the fronts of all the houses, et cetera. For those types of issues where we have houses that have been out there for a long time with fences, 5, 10, 15 years, can we have a policy, maybe through resolution, where if there is a complaint about a fence, if it's a newly erected fence, that's one thing. But if it's a fence that's been up for, a certain period of time, maybe 6 months, year, or whatever, that it's the city's policy, we just don't enforce that. With the exception of safety, sightline, and those types of issues.
I think that wasn't exactly what I was talking about in my
definitely inspired
conversation.
me, yes.
Yeah. I think my thought was from a complaint-driven perspective, right? If we're complaint-driven, that I feel like there ought to be a window of opportunity limit, a statute of limitations, if you will. Like if somebody erects a new fence, then anybody who wants to complain about that fence should have to do so within 6 months, a year, some limited time window, right? You shouldn't be able to have a fence and then 5 years later somebody new moves in and all of a sudden complains about it. And I think that also then helps enforcement to some degree, because this idea that if we got a complaint, we don't know when a fence was built. There's no record. We don't know if it was built 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, what code was in place at the time necessarily. So it feels like at least going forward, there needs to be some sort of, it's an idea at least, some sort of idea of you got a clock that starts ticking at some point.
Yeah.
But
So
What if, go ahead, Josh.
we've had some preliminary conversations at the staff level about that concept, and I think that is workable. I think there's some nuances we'd have to work through in terms of what counts as new construction versus repair, that sort of thing. I think if it meets your request, and if that's the direction of council, we could develop an internal code enforcement prioritization policy. That wouldn't have to be a city council policy. If city council wants to adopt that policy, certainly you could, but I think it would be sufficient just for city council to direct staff that that's your wish, and we could develop our own internal code enforcement policy for that.
It's my expectation that there's going to be a level of reasonableness, knowing our staff in how they choose to address any complaint. The reasonableness factor after, all the safety issues. So I don't believe an additional action by council is required, just a reasonableness. If most aspects of the fence code, it's related to safety and utilities. There's the aesthetics portion as well. I don't want to be like some cities where you've got 6-foot fences across the front of homes and creating, that's their aesthetics issue. But, yeah. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'll speak up. So back to the issue at hand, the fence code update. So I think it's really important to segregate the code update from enforcement, which are two completely separate issues here. What's in front of us is really the code update, and I think that it's important that we focus on that. I think enforcement is not in the purview of council, to the mayor's point. Obviously we can give our input, but at the end of the day, that's a staff-driven mechanism. So I like the code update because it's more permissive. So there's actually no additional restrictions. In fact, it's lessening the restrictions that are on place. So it gives the homeowners more permissiveness. Which then, when you bring it back to the enforcement side, when you start talking about grandfathering doesn't make sense because there's nothing to grandfather. We're not creating a less lenient or less restrictive situation. So there's nothing, if we were being more restrictive, then grandfathering obviously would be on the table, but there's nothing to grandfather because everything that was in compliance before is still in compliance. So anything that's out of compliance has been out of compliance since at least 2011. So I think that's the wrong terminology to ask for. I think Julia or Josh, I guess, gets credit for this, that what was really being asked for in the letters we received is really an amnesty like an across-the-board amnesty for everyone, and I think that's a really, really dangerous precedent to go down. I'm not in favor of that, because that just basically says, okay, anything goes, and then the next time in 6 months from now, somebody's going to say, I want amnesty too. And where does that draw the line, and why do you have standards? So I think those are my point of view, is I think we need to really separate the enforcement angle from this code, and I think this code is good, and I know the Planning Commission spent a lot of time, took public testimony. They had at least 2, think maybe 3 working sessions, even think took some testimony at one of the working sessions, and they had a lot of conversation about permitting. I know permitting came up. I'll give you what I recall from the Planning Commission meetings. There was interest by some planning commissioners on doing a permitting process. I think what it came down to be is there's really 2 types of permitting you could do, right? And the one would just be you pay a fee, you get a copy of the fence standards, and basically it's an acknowledgement that you read the standards, right? Whether you understand them or not, it's completely doesn't change anything, right? If you already read the standards without a permit and you misinterpreted them, you would have misinterpreted them anyway if it was just an automatic issue permit. I think the other concept of having a permit that then's reviewed by staff and somebody goes out, I mean, nobody was in favor of that. The fee involved in that would be obviously, substantial. The staff time would be substantial. I don't think anybody building a fence in town would be in favor of that. I know we received input from some of the fence companies that were adamantly opposed to that, and I don't think anyone was seriously considering that. So I think when it came back to staff and the Planning Commission talking about kind of a shell issue, nominal fee permit, it came back to the point of what value are we gaining from that? If people already don't know that they need to go look at the codes, they're not going to know they need to go get a permit, and they're going to build it without a permit anyway. And now we've got a whole nother enforcement issue because people built fences without permits, and it didn't seem like a workable solution. So, but I know it was discussed.
I have another comment. It's okay. I was thinking about this from an educational point of view. With the time that I spent on Planning Commission, sometimes, even I was confused sometimes by the code and had to get clarification. It might help, if there were maybe some visual diagrams or graphics on the website that identified.
Which Erica mentioned.
Yeah. I'm speaking about like the kind of lot you have. I mean, one of the questions was, do I have a side yard, or is it a corner lot? If the road goes around your house and you're not next to, you're probably on a corner, that's probably not a side. The side would be a fence between 2 houses. The corner would be away from the sidewalk. So maybe a diagram of something that would help identify. If I could identify what kind of lot I have, that would identify what kinds of fences I might be able to build on my lot. And I think in question the lot was kind of an odd shape. So whether it cuts a corner or rounds it, I thought it was still on a corner. So, but again, maybe an interpretation or some kind of a graphic to help people understand what kind of a lot they've got would help. So that's my suggestion.
Other comments, questions? Does council want to continue as normal to a second reading?
You want an answer to the property line before we do that?
Does staff have any concern with my concern, or are we good?
I really do not have any concern with your concern. Frankly, I would have to really search for a situation where you don't have the sidewalk within the right of way, but I didn't want to say definitively that's always going to be the case. But I don't see that.
We certainly have missing sidewalks in town.
Yeah, certainly missing sidewalks, but it's from the property line. So a property owner is responsible for identifying where their property line is, and if they have questions, they can ask staff. We'll help them identify in terms of identify your pins. Sometimes they may have to hire a surveyor. But there are tools, there's cues that people can find to help identify where their property line is, and we're always happy to help people with that. So if there isn't a sidewalk, there's still a property line. There's always going to be a property line. So I don't see there being a concern.
Great. Josh, you concur? Putting you both on the record.
If I don't know what the situation is on the ground as well as Julia does. So the only scenario where I would have a concern is if we had a sidewalk that is completely on somebody's property, not in the right of way at all. If we're relatively confident that is not the case, then I'm not concerned. If the sidewalk is partially on and partially off, I think we're going to be fine because it's 5 feet back from the property line. It would have to be a sidewalk that is completely on somebody's property. I have to.
Right, because the desired effect would be 5 feet back from the sidewalk. And if their property line was in the middle of the sidewalk and they built a fence that was 2.5 feet back from the sidewalk, they'd be legally in compliance, but we wouldn't be having the intended effect of the
Well,
code
they do
change.
still have to meet the site distance requirements regardless of
Right.
those. Right. So I have to defer to the expert on where the
So
sidewalks are actually located.
just to throw you another bone and let you say yay or nay. So we're unable to build sidewalks in this town in some areas because we don't have the right of way. So that means the property line goes up to the curb or the edge of the asphalt. So in those cases, they're going to go 5 feet from there, in one case, to build a side yard fence.
Correct.
We're collectively okay with that plan.
That's a whole nother question, whether or not you guys are collectively okay with that plan, but that is the way the code reads and the way that could occur.
Prior, it could have been 8 foot.
Right.
From the asphalt.
So really, we have I want to say maybe 4 issues, right? We have safety, right, with the sight lines, and that prevails over anything else. So that trumps all. So that's not really an issue. We have aesthetics, which is totally up to your discretion, and I don't have an opinion on that. And then we have just whether the code is readable and coherent and makes sense. And I think we have code that it is based now on a property line, which is a definitive thing that exists, as opposed to being based on a sidewalk, which sometimes does and sometimes doesn't, which is the previous code. So I think we've met 2 of those. The question
So
is
from a
just whether
city fiduciary standpoint, if we are turning around in the future and want to build a sidewalk on a road and buy the right of way, acquire the right of way, we're also potentially buying a fence and building a fence. Because the fence, if they build a fence 5 feet from the asphalt,
correct.
we could be building a new fence. Yeah.
So are the 2 conditions we're talking about is basically if there's a sidewalk or not a sidewalk, and then where that property line is, right? So is there a way we could adjust the
We
code
absolutely
to
could.
accompany?
If council would like for us, I'm absolutely confident that we could come up with some language that would address that.
Cover one's
Want to take this
collective
to a second hearing?
interest.
We can come up with something.
I think we should get some more input on that.
I don't feel like we're all definitive enough yet tonight to.
You've got 2 weeks, and that's why you have a 2-step process.
So I would request that review and just see if there could be further defined, just so that there is no ifs, ands, so that in those cases, because part of our collective goal as a community is to have sidewalks all over town, fill in all the gaps. And in some cases, we'll have to buy the right of way, or the easement, or whatever, to put it there. And if it's a side yard or backyard, we'll be tearing it down and building another. So that's my 10 cents, which is why I can't support doing it in one meeting.
I do have another question. So the, what is her name? What is her name? Carissa. When she came up, she mentioned a couple things about the code not being compliant with what was on the website and vice versa. And I know you sent the response via email today, and I printed it off and I left it on my desk. Could you just go over some of those responses?
So, yeah, Eric, if you want to come up too. So regarding the website, we did look and we could not find where it was not consistent. I guess we believe that the website is consistent with the code. There's an interpretation, and I think the issue is that when she read the website, my understanding is that she read that she had a side yard, not a corner yard, and that is a misinterpretation. So we will absolutely do all that we can to help make things more clear through diagrams, through more more information, but we don't believe that the website was inconsistent. Do you want us to go through all of the?
No, I think
Okay.
that was the big one, was the thought that that was inconsistent.
Let's stay up here.
Great. So,
And
anything
just-
else for?
And just one more thing. And I know it's not part of this fence code, but I do think it's important that we're really clear with our community about what our enforcement policies are. We're a complaint-driven system basically right now, so we're not actively out there looking for violations. And there is, with the issue we had with the basketball hoops earlier in the year, kind of brought that to attention to it. So I think we really have to be clear in our policies, even if they're staff policies, so people understand that we're not going to go out there and try to find every fence we can find.
That's correct.
One thing I do want to say too, and sorry, Joe, for interrupting, is I do appreciate, Erica, what you had in the presentation where I think you talked about the outreach to the fence companies. Because I think they are going to be a little bit of that gatekeeper of this information. Now it's putting faith into them that they will know the code and conform with it. But I mean, I spoke with Joe earlier today. I replaced, my house backs up onto Sunset, replaced the whole stretch of fence there. Just told the builder, who's a reputable, well-known builder in Sherwood, I said, yep, just that fence, but a new one, just that. And so I trusted him to know what to do and to do it, and that it was within compliance. So I mean, I'd like that idea that we can have them being knowledgeable on this as well. I think that will hopefully eliminate a lot of issues going forward. So I appreciate that. Attempt to go one step farther than really we need to. So I appreciate that.
One thing I want to address that was raised by Carissa was the previous code enforcement officer determining that it was a civil situation in previous fence cases. We had clarification today. Quite often it was a civil issue because the issue that was brought to his attention was not the issue of the height of the fence or the location. It was basically a dispute between two neighbors on whose property is the fence on. And that is a civil matter. The city doesn't get into property line disputes and whose fence is on which property. And that's the majority of his cases when he was in the position were those kind of issues. He did not receive many complaints about a fence being too high or built in the wrong location. Nor has our code officer now, our full-time, Dan Miller, received many complaints, except for the two that kind of triggered this whole process about a year ago.
Do you know if there's been any since those two?
What's that?
Has there been any since those two?
I don't believe so.
I'm not aware of any. We can certainly double check, but regardless, he was not enforcing any of them until we were kind of resolved. I don't believe so, but we'll double check. It sounds like we're going to be coming back to you anyway, so we can certainly report back.
Great. Anything else in this? Can we move? Okay. Public hearing number 2, ordinance 2020-002, amending Title 5 of the Sherwood Municipal Code regarding business licenses and regulations. Julia.
Hello, it's nice to see you this evening. So in the prior hearing, we were just talking about enforcement being complaint-based, and I was going to chime in then, but I decided I'll wait until this hearing. That is true the majority of the time. Most of our code compliance is complaint-based, but there are a few situations that we intend to be more proactive because if we're not, things can get out of control. One of them is signs, temporary signs. Primarily, but the other one is ultimately going to be business licenses. There's a lot of businesses in town that we believe don't have business licenses, and part of it is that they may not even know that they need to get a business license, so there'll be an education and outreach component as well. But before we began in earnest ensuring that all the businesses in town had business licenses, we wanted to make sure that the business license code was clear and clean and up to date. And so that caused us to look at that section of the code, Title 5, and we identified quite a few changes. Some of that code, it's business licenses and other regulations. The other regulations in some cases were very, very, very out of date. And so we are proposing amendments to the business license regulations just to be really more clear, to define terms a little bit more clearly, make it clear that just because you have a business license does not mean that you have met all other code standards in the city, because it's truly just really a fee and a permit to operate a business. It doesn't mean that you meet land use approval and building approval and things like that. There had been a time where we did some review of that, but we found that was contrary to what was really intended by the code, but also, I believe, state law in terms of permitting business licenses. We changed the date of the license to be beginning January 1 to December 31st rather than rolling, and just kind of cleaned up some processes. Under business recycling, we moved that from business license to its own chapter. We are proposing to eliminate amusement games, bingo and lotto, and raffle games and taxi cabs in their entirety. Again, very out of date, and the process that was identified was very archaic and cumbersome. And we don't think that while we could potentially get some revenue from that, we don't believe it is worth the effort that we would be putting in to manage that. Under liquor establishments, we're proposing to delete 5.20, which is most of it, because it's covered by state law and OLCC, but we're retaining a section regarding processes and fees for liquor licenses to ensure that we still have that process to and then no changes to recreational marijuana businesses. We had a work session on this, and there was some discussion about whether or not we could have different fees for different types of uses, and we've modified the proposed code language to make it clear that we could, if we so chose, through fee schedule amendments. That is all that I have to update you guys on. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we recommend that you hold a public hearing and consider approval of the proposed amendments.
Thank you, Julia. Any questions before we do public testimony?
Just a quick one. What's a typical business license cost right now?
It's about $75, $60 or $75, I believe.
Okay.
And then there's that's sort of the base, and then there's a certain amount if you have more employees. But the fee, frankly, our business license fees are fairly low, and that's certainly something that we may choose to look at in the future. We had explored that about a year ago, but there were a lot of state laws and a lot of things that were really impacting businesses hard, and so I know the police was looking at potentially using that as a partial funding mechanism for some things that they wanted to do. It's something that we might want to look at from a variety of angles, economic development, police, as well as just revenue, but we want to make sure that
Sure.
It's balanced with.
And that would be handled through a resolution, not this
Right, that would not
ordinance.
be in the ordinance, that would be adopted as part of the fee schedule.
Is the way the fee schedules, is the way the ordinance set up, it would allow us, for instance, the other direction, could we set up a floor that basically says if your gross receipts are less than some amount, you don't need a business license, or the amount is zero or something
Yeah,
like that?
the rate is set in the fee schedule, and so we could alter the rate structure within the fee schedule however we so determined was appropriate. Right.
Perfect.
Right, before any more questions, anyone like to give testimony on the proposed ordinance? No one signed up. We'll close the public hearing on the first reading of the proposed ordinance. Questions by council, of staff, or discussion?
I just think this is really good housekeeping work, and I'm in favor of passing it, whether it be tonight or in 2 weeks.
If there's not a pressing a reason to do it tonight, I'd prefer we wait, just in case there's other citizens that want to comment on this.
Yeah. Any other comment, question? All right, we will continue this in a couple weeks. Thank you, Julia. Next, city manager report.
Mayor and council, I have a couple items, more for the public than for the council, of course. Citizens University, a couple councilors actually started promoting on social media. Thank you. So we are accepting applications starting today for the next session of Citizens University, which will start in March. This is a 7-week course, basically of how the city operates. Many of you have participated in it. We had a great story in the Gazette last month about the success of the program, and applications are due by February 7th, and then classes will begin in March. And it's over March, April, over about a 7 or 8 week period with a break at spring break. So I encourage folks to apply. We are also looking for some new members of 2 committees. The Traffic Safety Committee, the deadline was last week, January 3rd, and then the Budget Committee deadline for an opening on budget is this Friday. We haven't received the numbers that I'd like in terms of both of those committees, so we're going to extend the deadline to January 24th to get a better pool of candidates, and we'll be promoting that. So if you or anyone watching at home wants to participate in local government, the Budget Committee is obviously a great committee to get involved with. We have 1 opening, and then the Traffic Safety Committee that the mayor had mentioned earlier in the meeting is a new committee, and we're looking for good folks that want to get involved in safety issues in their neighborhoods and traffic calming and pedestrian safety, et cetera. So we're going to extend the deadline a few more weeks with the holidays to see if we can get some more applicants. That's all I had, unless you have questions for myself or any of the directors that are here.
All right. Thanks,
you.
Joe. And Saturday of this week, Joe?
I just got a application for Citizens University on my phone. Isn't that? Someone is at home watching. So this Saturday is a council goal setting. We do this every year. Usually it's better to do it in January because it can help inform the budget process, which will be starting soon. So council will be meeting in this room. It is a council work session. It'll be a 9 o'clock start. We are using a new consultant to help facilitate that process, and I anticipate some additional information probably tomorrow for council in terms of the schedule. I'm anticipating, like in previous years, start at 9, probably early afternoon, finish. So depending on how we go. This will be a 2-step process this year. We're going to meet as a council, go through, and then staff is going to work on more specific work plans to bring back to you, and then we'll have a second session in February to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward with your priorities and projects. So we're looking forward to it. That'll be this Saturday.
Thanks, Joe. Council announcements? Certainly wish everybody, hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and great New Year's. That's all I got. Keep it quick.
I'll go. I mean, if nobody else wants to jump in.
Go.
Okay, went to the Parks and Rec meeting last night. Jason Waters came and gave us an update on the Cedar Creek Trail. We're in right-of-way negotiation right now. That's going to be not a short process, but it's not as long as it was going to be a year ago, and we're getting closer. The never-ending saga, but it's going to be really cool when it's done. At some point, we were talking about this briefly at the Parks meeting last night, we have to, we collectively as the city have to figure out, right now there is no budget for lights on that trail. There is no budgets for any sort of cover on the trail. There's no budget. I mean, you know, we have a trail, but we're going to have to at some point figure out what do we want to do with the trail. You know, what amenities, you know, park benches or whatever.
Are we putting conduit under the trail?
I don't remember Jason talking about conduit. Oh, he did talk about Wi-Fi on the trail, but I don't think that's conduit.
Just putting some conduit while you're digging it up is pretty cheap and easy.
I'm sure Julie's going to write that down right now. I saw her put her glasses on, and she's going to write it down. Anyway, it's coming along, and I think Jason, literally, we need to have a plaque somewhere on the trail that has Jason's name on it, because he has borne the weight of this whole project. Let's see, and Ryan Buck came and gave us an update on the YMCA's running of the Sherwood Recreational Facility, and they're completing some HVAC maintenance and updates and whatnot. And we were told that a couple of big pumps are maybe going to need to be replaced, the pool pump and the toy pump, which I think is the pool toy pump. Is that what they're talking about? Yeah. So that was kind of maybe unexpected, but they're like 20 years old, so not that unexpected. But so they're working through that. And he mentioned, the new CEO from the regional office who we met, last month. And now Ryan says, I know he's going to shake things up. I don't know what he's going to do yet, but so that's all coming. Let's see, the Sherwood Robin Hood Festival Association meeting will be on the 16th at 7 p.m. downtown at the Midday Masonic Lodge. There we go. And let's see, Parks Master Plan. There's a community meeting at the Arts Center on the 30th where the citizens can come and weigh in on the Parks Master Plan, and MIG is going to be there, and they're great. They did some great work for the city of West Lynn, and so I'm very excited to see what they're going to have. It's at 6:30 over at the Arts Center. Let's see, you want to talk about the producers? Sean, you want me to talk about it? Do you want to talk about it? All right, so the Sherwood Foundation for the Arts is presenting the producers, the Mel Brooks movie made play. Anyway, that'll be opening on the 17th at the Arts Center, 17, 18, 19, 24, 25, 26. Tickets are on sale now at sherwoodarts.org. It's probably a PG-13 plus kind of a show, but, I remember when we sold out 3 nights of Les Mis in the park, I don't think we had a single child come, but we sold out completely. It was great. So, there is, I shouldn't call it
adults in this town.
Adult entertainment.
There are some adult themes in this.
Adult-ish entertainment.
Almost half.
Yeah. And then also, are you going to talk about the puzzle competition? I'll do it. I'm first, so I'll talk about it. The Sherwood Foundation, you guys have nothing to talk about.
None of us need to say anything.
Sherwood Foundation for the Arts, the 7th annual jigsaw puzzle contest, which now they have people coming from out of the country coming to do this puzzle competition. The registration opens on the 15th of January. It'll be on Leap Day on the 29th of February at the LDS Church over on Meineke.
Oh, changing locations again.
Yep.
That's a new location because they've outgrown. Yeah, they're going to be out in the parking lot pretty soon. That's all I got. Lots of stuff going on.
Awesome. Anyone else?
I'll just got a couple things. I just like to shout out to Lance of the Field House for his staff report. Looks like our field house is doing well this year compared to last year. So great job. Thanks for the report. We haven't been at a council meeting since early December, so since then we had a boards and commissions dinner in December where we all met with our boards and commissions. Each board and commission gave an update on what they accomplished. Sorry, Tim. What they accomplished this year and what they hope to accomplish next year. And then we already talked about council goal setting. A couple things going on at the YMCA upcoming is January 11th, Parents Night Out. Drop your kids off for a movie and pizza, go on a date, go shopping, whatever you need to do, but they'll watch your kids and serve them pizza. And
When's that?
January 11th. You gonna bring your kids?
I might bring someone's kids.
That I don't know. So I will check on that. Okay, January 18th, their registration ends for the youth soccer for ages 3 through 6 and youth rugby ages 7th and 8th. So that's open ages 7 to 8. So that's open now, ends January 18th. So get your kiddos registered. January 25th, they're having a CPR AED first aid class.
That's cool.
And guess what started again today? Pickleball.
They're back in.
So they have pickleball again. They took a little break to get some rules in place and get our
A surprisingly competitive
gym
sport.
floors probably back up to snuff. So that started today on their Facebook page or whatever. They have their newsletter. They have what days they're going to be doing pickleball and all the parameters around that. That's it.
Anyone else?
Yes. I guess I'll go next. Just a couple things. I covered for Keith at the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting last month. It was a good meeting. We had we had some of the lobbyists were there giving us an update on the legislative session, and some of the impacts of those bills that were passed. There was a lively debate about HB 2001, which was the bill that effectively ended single-family detached zoning in most cities in the metro area. But overall, good meeting. Not a lot happened there, but it was fun to attend. I also, we met with Juan Carlos, who's a Washington County Commissioner. Doesn't cover our district, but in our ongoing effort to work with the region in terms of getting funding for our 2 pedestrian crossing projects and various other projects in town, we wanted to give him tours. So Keith wasn't there for that one, but I drove Juan around town and showed him what's going on in the city. Joe was there and Julia was there, and he brought his staff member. And I thought
that makes 3, so that's a good chunk of them, and I'll see if we can get any others out this way.
That's right.
That was Roy Rogers, and now
So we've done
Carlos and Catherine Harrington.
Roy, and Carlos.
Cool.
And
Just selected a vice chair.
Juan Carlos was? Very good.
And kind of an exciting thing with him, he has his staff, or one of his policy folks is the first suburban policy expert to be at Metro. Every other policy expert has come from the downtown core area, so that was good to hear. And he seemed to have a pretty good handle on issues related to edge cities versus core cities in the metro area.
How long has Metro existed? 30 years, 40 years? Finally have one from the burbs as an expert?
Yeah, so that was a good meeting, and hopefully we'll get some support from him moving forward. Other than that, we didn't have a historical society meeting last month. We did have, you mentioned the boards and commissions meeting or dinner. That was great. We have a lot of great volunteers in this town that spend a lot of time on those boards and commissions, and it's nice to be able to recognize that every year. We also have, I got my timing right, we had the staff appreciation luncheon last month, which, and again, we have great staff. I remember as I was driving to that luncheon that day, I was coming from Portland and taking back roads and roads that weren't so great and hitting potholes and,
Hopefully not cutting through neighborhoods and pissing them off.
Maybe, well, Waze tells me where to go. I go where Waze says to go. But anyways, as you come into Sherwood, you always know you're in Sherwood because our staff, our Public Works Department, our Parks Department, everyone who supports them, our Police Department, they make this a great town. And we have great roads and a great look and feel to our community. And I just really appreciate everything they do to make sure that happens. And it's great that we can appreciate them at that luncheon once a year. And that's all I have.
Until the one in the summer.
Yes.
Twice a year.
Which is a barbecue, right?
We appreciate other things during the summer.
Right?
Bummed to miss the retreat on Saturday. I'll be in Seattle at a training, unfortunately. But
All right.
yeah, it is what it is. Let's see. The next chamber meeting is on the 14th at the Ackerley. That'll be cool to see their new location, and I believe it starts at 7:15 to 8:45. The new library newsletter is out, so if you want to see all the cool things that are going on at the library, there's a lot of new classes that are starting up in the new year. And let's see, I'm looking forward to the new committee that's going to be starting. We haven't met yet, and the senior center committee doesn't meet until later on this month, so that's all I've got.
Well, that's not this week. It's later.
What?
Senior advisory actually meets tomorrow night
I
for
thought it
the
was
first
tomorrow
time.
Why did I not get something?
Did we choose a liaison?
You don't have an official liaison.
Oh, okay.
If you want to attend, you're sure.
Okay, so
Anybody can
it's
attend.
tomorrow?
Yeah, and it's just a very organizational meeting, Robert's rules, what's a board do, basics kind of
What
thing.
time?
6:30, I believe. It's in the Monday weekly report that I
Okay,
send
I
you.
just missed it. And it's here?
It's at the senior center, I think.
Oh, I
Right?
totally
It's
missed
the senior
that.
center, isn't that right?
Okay.
It may be at the senior center. It's posted on the city website. You should have received an agenda, so.
I think
if you
that's what
didn't-
Kristen said last night. It's at the senior center.
Okay. Yeah, I just missed it.
Okay, I'll follow up on it
All right.
for you, so. Email. Okay.
Gotta do that once in a while, Eugene.
I've just got one thing, and Joe, maybe you can confirm. It's my understanding that Saturday, January 18th, our state representative, Courtney Neron, is going to...
Actually, I was going to mention that after.
We're going to have a meeting in this room.
This room, she's having a town hall.
Yeah, a town hall from 6 to 7:30, so it's important that everybody in Sherwood come and attend. And she has been a great advocate for our city since she's been on. I know that the mayor and Council President Rosner have been in contact with her fairly often. She's been very open. I've met with her down in Salem a couple times, down in her office since I worked down there on a couple things.
Nice.
Yeah, it's handy. And so I'm sure she'll probably be talking about the upcoming legislative session. We have an opportunity to voice our concerns, things that we would like. This is a great opportunity. So get out there or get here and attend to that. She's very outgoing and friendly and receptive and is really a big advocate for Sherwood. So.
I will be promoting it through social media and spread the word. Last time she held a town hall was very, very lightly attended. So she has been a strong advocate for Sherwood and our interests. And
I'd just like to amplify that because you have a lot of people, electeds from the region, that will tell you they support something, but that's all you ever hear. And she has been great. She actually shows up to planning meetings that we're having here in the city about the pedestrian bridge. I've never seen that happen.
And start help rewriting things.
Yeah, so she is all over it. She's supporting projects in Sherwood. She's representing us at the state level and doing a great job, and I can't say enough good things about her.
Here.
I'll be very brief, for real. So planning commission meeting next week, next Tuesday, 7 o'clock right here. Also, I'd just like to say sherwoodoregon.gov, the city's website. We hear a lot about people, I didn't know this meeting was happening. When you notice us, we notice in a bunch of different ways, but just go to sherwoodoregon.gov every once in a while, maybe once a week. There's the very first thing in the upper left corner, there's a link to the upcoming agenda of all boards and commissions. You can always look at what's coming up anytime there. It's always live. Very easy just to look at that and see things you may or may not know about that you might be interested in. So just a shout out for that.
Awesome. Great. So we're talking the future in the next week at Metro Mayor's Greater Portland Inc. Hopefully you'll be there. Cover for me.
WCC coming up.
WCCC is next week. Going to meet with the Y CEO this week. I got something else going on. There's full calendar for next week for other stuff, which is great. Going to be busy. New year, all that good stuff. Joe?
can I put a plug in for another deadline for the Chamber? So the Chamber of Commerce is doing their annual awards event earlier than normal. Usually they do this in June. They're doing it in late February at a new location at the Langer's Entertainment Center, so it's a new venue. The deadline to nominate either individuals or businesses in various categories is this Friday. Because people aren't used to the event being so early, I'm sure their nominations are maybe slightly down. So I encourage everybody to think about individuals or businesses that should be nominated for awards. And it's very simple to put a nomination in. And as many of you know, just to be nominated is an honor. But there's a lot of good people in town doing great things and a lot of good businesses in town. And it's a big deal to be nominated. So I just wanted to put that plug in. So.
Excellent. So with that, we are going to adjourn to an executive session. Thank you, everyone.